Good to have everybody with us. Joining us now is Congressman Rob Wittman, representing the 1st District, Republican in Virginia, and he is also chairman of the all-powerful Sea Power Subcommittee, if you say. It's got a long name to it, but that's kind of the short name that I have. Congressman Wittman, good to have you with us.
John, it's great to be with you this morning. Great to be back.
Okay, lots to talk about. I don't know where we start. Let's start with North Korea. You went out to San Diego the other day to check out things with our naval armada, as
yes,
President
went out there and
calls
visited
it.
with our sailors and to get their perspective on things that are going on. Obviously, they've been very, very busy in that neighborhood.
Tell me about what the plan is in North Korea. I know we texted a little bit over the weekend while you were out there. We have a fleet in the general area. It's not exactly in the Korean Peninsula. It's in Southeast Asia off of Thailand, about a couple thousand miles away. But what's the plan here?
Well, John, the plan is, obviously to be able to have a presence there to provide another element of influence on Kim Jong-un. The most important part of it is what President Xi Jinping in China has been doing. China has been taking unprecedented actions against North Korea, and I do believe that they see that this is at an untenable place with security in the region, and that there is a significant amount of risk to China. I think the president's been very good in impressing upon China their need to act. As you know, when China has turned away coal shipments, has done other things economically to impact North Korea, I think that signals a level of seriousness with this issue that they are willing to undertake now, which they have never been willing to undertake before. What I hope is this. I hope that has an impact, and I hope that they continue with that's consistent to where we don't have to pursue other options. But the worry is with North Korea and their continued efforts to develop not just nuclear warheads, but also the vehicles with which to launch and deliver them, those intercontinental ballistic missiles. The concern is that they are not that far away from being able to deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States. In other words, to put the United States at risk. And that, by any means, is unacceptable with the unpredictability of Kim Jong-un. The difficulty is that if you look at a military engagement, none of those options are desirable options either. If you look at, what would happen with a conventional conflict and the 10,000 plus weapons that are trained on the city of Seoul, and what would happen, even if that conflict were limited, which I think in that sense probably it would not be, there's some difficult decisions that will have to be made. And what you want to do is to obviously avoid conflict. I do think, though, that presence there is another influencing factor on Kim Jong-un. He is certainly someone that is confident, someone that exudes that arrogance that I think sometimes can make people take pause. I think you have to be able to at least call his bluff and say, listen, we're not going to back away from this, but then use other means by which to push North Korea. And I don't think you go back to the multilateral talks that we've had in the past, because this is Korea's typical way of rattling the swords, getting attention, getting concessions, and then not changing behavior. So I think that policy has failed in the past, and it's not one that we should be pursuing going forward. But I do think the most successful opportunity for us is what's happening now with China, for China to take a very active role there in influencing North Korea. They are, as you know, the main trading partner with North Korea, do have a considerable amount of influence with North Korea. They have been trying to play both sides of the issue. One of the things that we've looked at is the weapons that were on display at the recent parade. It's believed that one of the missiles that was on display there was a Chinese missile. So, China, I think in many instances, tries to have it both ways. And in this situation, I think the U.S. has to tell China, listen, you are going to be on our side to push back against North Korea, because if not, in your region of the world, this is going to be a bad thing. It's going to be negative for China. And you have to take an active role, because if China doesn't, then it's not something that the United States can do unilaterally. And even the influence of South Korea and Japan is limited in what I believe will affect Kim Jong-un's behavior.
But, Congressman, you're pretty clear here in laying out that there's not a lot of military options that anybody's going to be particularly enamored with, because, remember, I know you're a student of history. You go back to Bill Clinton, 96, when this whole thing started, was very seriously considering taking out their nuclear facilities. Remember that? As you go back in history and read the documents. And in fact, there was a day there that it said that President Bill Clinton wanted to go forward with a pretty major U.S. bombing attack and just take those out. And then he was dissuaded on that because of the backlash against Seoul, that they have so many conventional weapons. Basically, his advisors at the time said, look, they have the capability to turn the city of Seoul into an incinerator. And so Clinton thought about it and decided no. That's what the history shows. What is different now? I mean, it's only got worse.
It has. There are more conventional weapons trained on Seoul. We know that there will, under any conventional scenario, taking out all, possibility of the use of nuclear weapons, just a conventional conflict there, even with what we have there in the country and what South Korea has. And we do have the ability to intercept the artillery rounds as they come in, but not all of them, because there's a significant number there. We are able to track and take out the artillery pieces as soon as they fire something. But again, with the sheer numbers there, John, there would be massive casualties, and that some estimates of over 1 million in a very, very short period of time in the city of Seoul, which has about 20 million people in that particular urban and suburban region. So no good scenarios. All of them would be highly undesirable. So it would be something that you would use as the absolute last resort. We do have the ability to intercept and to take down a missile if it were launched to the United States, but again, you would prefer that things not get to that particular state. The good news is at least showing that we have the military capability. It's in the region. We're willing to use it, as we've seen in other situations, in a limited capacity. Hopefully, persuades both North Korea and China to say, what, we would rather not in our region have this type of conflict. Let's be serious about resolving things diplomatically. I think that's the true leveraging power of the military, is to be able to now use it as a convincing force for those that otherwise don't believe in U.S. resolve. So, but I would agree. I think as our leaders look at this, knowing General Mattis as I do and others, I think the recommendation for any type of use of force there would be last on the list. But I think using it strategically as it's being used right now is a good way to force the parties to the table to get us to a point where North Korea acts properly. Now, I don't know what we're going to be able to do to interdict or to get them to stop their effort in becoming essentially a intercontinental capable nuclear force. I don't know that we're going to be able to slow that down or stop it, but we'll have to, or be able to do that diplomatically. We're going to have to see what influence China has and what can be worked out. As you know, we've had agreements before. As you know, with during the Clinton administration, we had agreements that North Korea did not follow at all. So it's not like you can place a whole lot of faith either in them abiding by any type of agreement that you might be able to enter into.
Well, that's the thing. They haven't followed anything. Let me just ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just cut off their hard cash? Why not just cut off all their funding through the various banking systems that they manipulate their way through? Obviously, you'd have to get China to do that. But if the U.S. just simply said, and your chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee put this out the other day, just cut off all their access to hard currency through all U.S. and Western banks, then they can't buy anything. Then they can't buy the technology they need in order to go forward. Why wouldn't we do that, sir?
Well, I would agree, John. That's one of the ways to do it, to be able to cut off any type of exchange in currency so they can transact business. And of course, since the dollar is the world currency, if you took the ability for them to exchange within the world banking system, then yes, then they are limited as to who they can deal with. It's very difficult to do a straight transaction with a country or a business in that country. So yes, that would have a significant effect, and there's no reason why that wouldn't be on the table of options for us to further isolate North Korea. I would agree with the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee that that's a very powerful tool that we can use. And if we get China, to work with us on that, it's an even more powerful tool.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday, the president saying, hey, we might have a new deal on repeal and replace Obamacare. We might be able to get it done by Friday. Everybody seems to be coming together. We got this great bill. We're going to pass it. We're going to keep the government open. We're going to build a wall, all in one. Wishful thinking or anything that might be close to reality?
Well, I hope it's close to reality. I haven't seen it yet, so I always have a little bit of skepticism there. We definitely need to be able to get this done. John, we cannot use a continuing resolution. I think that would be extraordinarily harmful. I could not vote for another continuing resolution. Hopefully they do have what's necessary in a funding bill. We can get that out quickly when we get back, get that over to the Senate, and then have them quickly voted out and get this done. This is something that should have been done a while back. I was not in favor of the previous CR because I think it's just too much for the incoming administration to accomplish, trying to do two budgets in that short period of time, and that makes this even more difficult. But it does sound like there is some positive things going on with that. I've been keeping up with it, and some of the things, I haven't seen the full bill yet, so I always reserve judgment until I've seen all the details. But at least the basic elements that were being mentioned in it, I think, are positive.
Okay, so you're saying it's a maybe, could happen, we're going to go forward, but you haven't seen anything yet, and so until you actually see something, it's just a lot of talk, right?
It is. My judgment is reserved, as always, until I see the details. So hopefully they will unveil that to us here quickly, because if not, it's like anything else. I hate going into these scenarios last minute and then boom, here it is. And then we get told, hey, here's your binary choice. Either vote this up or Armageddon. And I'm like, no, let's get this right. So. As I said, what I've heard about it seems to be going in the right direction. I want to make sure, though, that we are understanding all the details before I make any kind of commitments on it.
Well, Congressman, you also carry a lot of weight now, because last time you came out early in opposition to this, but beyond that, I just want to be candid. You're not a part of the Freedom Caucus. You're not a part of the Tuesday Caucus. You're not a part of any group other than you're a powerful subcommittee chairman with seniority. And so a lot of people like me are going to be reserving judgment until we see what your position is.
Well, we're looking at all these things. Obviously, with whatever comes out to finish out the FY17 budget, whatever may be out there as far as the next realm of a healthcare reform bill, and the pieces that I have heard mentioned with that are, I believe, moving in the right direction. But again, before I make a statement or take a position on anything, I'm going to look at it and read it very, very carefully. And I think too, hopefully, they will take the time to make sure people understand it, that it's well communicated before they rush to doing something. The speaker said before that this wasn't going to be driven by time, and I certainly hope that continues.
Okay, Dr. Wittman, yesterday, President Trump signing a number of executive orders and memorandums, one of the big ones authorizing his Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, to do a study on the potential damage of China dumping aluminum and steel into the U.S. market. The Chi-Coms, as you know, Congressman Wittman, for some time have been subsidizing the production of steel and aluminum, dumping it in the United States so that it's being sold in the U.S. to manufacturers that need steel at under production cost. Number one, cheaper wages in China, but then number two, beyond that, they also subsidize it with government money in an effort basically to corner the steel market, put our steel companies out of business. They can't compete with them because they're dumping the steel and the aluminum in. There's no tariffs. Obama did nothing to stop this, although we railed on it forever. They did nothing. Congress didn't do anything. And it put many of our steel industry companies at risk, put people out of work. Now the president says the party with that is over. What does this executive order mean? And walk us through the sausage of how we actually stop it.
Well, John, you know, what the president, I believe, is doing is making sure that the places where we have control, that we indeed do those things. And that is, you know, when there's government-related purchases, that we purchase steel produced in America, that we also make sure there's a level playing field in how importation of that steel and aluminum take place from other countries. And, you know, we don't want to get into a trade war, but we want to make sure that there's fairness there. As you said, when China subsidizes the raw materials that come to these steel mills, many times the government itself actually is mining the iron ore to go to the steel mills. As you said, their labor costs are much less than ours. Their regulatory framework is very different than ours. You know, China has some of the worst air quality in the world, and it's because they don't do anything to really clean what they're belching out of these steel mills. So that's another element of trying to level the playing field. So I think what the president is doing is saying, how do we look at making sure that the rules under which everyone operates are at least close, and if not, how do we balance that by looking at the whole tariff system, but also making sure too that there is an effort there to make sure that we buy American products, including steel and aluminum that's produced here. So if we create the demand within the country, then we take away the ability for China to control the marketplace. And of course, when they dump at these below market prices, you know, it's always tempting for us to jump in there and say, well, we're going to buy steel from those areas. But, you know, we use a lot of steel to build ships and some aluminum there too. So that's another area where we can look at it and say, you know, should we be, you know, buying American-produced steel? And some folks will say, well, Rob, it runs the cost up. And I said, well, but in the long run, though, it helps sustain our economy. So I think there's a potential benefit to that too.
Look, I mean, you know, there's free trade and fair trade, and then there's illegal dumping of material in the United States to put our industries out of business by a foreign government. I mean, and you can't blame the companies for buying the cheaper steel. They're in business to make a profit. So if they can spend $1.50 less a ton or $2 a ton, that's what they're going to do. You can't blame the companies. You have to blame our stupid federal government for allowing this to happen for years and years, putting our people out of work. And then somebody's saying, well, you're going to pay another 27 cents for an iPhone. I mean, come on. My question is, how do you stop it? I get the study by the Department of Commerce, 50 days. I get that. Do you put a tariff? Do you just stop the ships at the dock? They can't unload it? What's the procedure? I mean, if you think of this, Congressman, this is the most insane policy that imaginable. You have a foreign country dumping material in to put our steel workers and steel business out of business to cost us jobs, and then they go on unemployment, and then they can't feed their families, and then we're giving up our steel industry, and the federal government sits there and does nothing.
Well, John, I think we have to look at all those options on the table. I do think leveling the playing field to make sure that there's parity in that, which does include things like tariffs, does include looking at the volume that comes in here, making sure too the things that we can control, and that is how purchases take place here. That we look at how we purchase steel, and that is to go to American manufacturers first. You know, we can control in some areas the demand, but we can also control how the supply happens. And as you point out, one of those areas is looking at tariffs, looking at trade equities, and that is making sure that we aren't having an unlevel playing field with our steel manufacturers. And as you said, with the subsidies there, with producing steel actually below the cost of the materials and the production itself, there's no way that our American mills can compete with that. And I agree with you that companies are going to buy that less expensive steel. So we have to find ways to make sure that trade is fair. And that's different between free trade. Free trade just says, hey, listen, open it all up and whatever happens, and then countries can take advantage of that. I think we need to look at everything on the table to make sure that we have fair trade, including how we manage both demand and supply. And supply, obviously, is what comes in the country, and looking at all the different aspects there about how we can level the playing field there, to include looking at tariffs.
All right. Well, as you know, I'm not shy about being a protectionist. I think we need tariffs, and I think how we've allowed this to fester is one of the mysteries of United States modern history. It's shameful what we've done. All right. We're out of time here,
Yep.
but I got one final question, Dr. Wittman.
Sure.
Are you considering a run for U.S. Senate in 2018?
Well, I am focused right now, John, on what we have before us, and we've got a lot of work to do there in Washington. Obviously, with getting this year's appropriations bills done, getting health care reform done, tax reform, infrastructure. So I'm going to be focusing on those things at the moment, and we'll see where things go from there.
Dr. Wittman, is it fair to say that you've not ruled out a run for U.S. Senate in 2018?
Well, I haven't even really gotten to the point, John, of a serious conversation with folks. There have been some folks that have mentioned it to me, but I haven't even gotten to the point of a serious conversation with it. So I can't even get to the point to say where I've ruled it in or out. So there's been so many other things going on. My total focus is on the things around me right now, and I haven't gotten to that point yet to even look at it. So it wouldn't be fair to say that I've even had the conversation with family or with others with that. But we're going to make sure we get through these things in front of us, and then we'll see where we go from there. All
right. So it sounds like a double maybe, right? Thank you, Congressman.
Well,
Wittman.
we haven't even got to that point yet. So we'll see what happens from there.
Sounds like you've not ruled anything in or out. Okay, thank you for your time, sure. Congressman Wittman. It's always a pleasure to have you on. More info, go to wittman.house.gov. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network, and I'll be right back. Keep it right here.